The vast majority of men will never experience what it's like to have a woman truly be attracted to you. To have a woman so obsessed with you, she willingly caters to your every whim and desire. She does everything she can to please you, bends over backwards to try to make sure you're always satisfied, and it doesn't even matter how you treat her. She's just obsessed no matter what. Most men, even guys that seem to do pretty well with the ladies, they don't really know what it's like. There's a whole nother world of female attention, female affection that most guys will never even know exists. Even though it's not really a secret, I think most men just don't want to admit it. And it's actually just one little thing that makes all the difference between a man that gets the Chad treatment and a man that just does all right with women. Let me illustrate with a story. There was this guy from my hometown. He was always the star athlete, 6'3", model looks. I didn't know him extremely well. We never went to the same school, but my mom babysat him and his brother a couple times when we were kids, and we were on the same Little League team one year. But I would have ended up hearing about him regardless because this guy ended up being the most popular guy in my high school, and he didn't even go to my high school. And that's not an exaggeration. Girls at my high school, which wasn't even in the same town as this guy, would always be talking about him. And guys at my school would brag about hanging out with him or just being at the same party he was at. He was basically a celebrity just based on one thing. And it wasn't because he was good at sports. Maybe that contributed because he was a good athlete, but he never went pro or anything. I think he did end up playing baseball in college, but not even Division I. But this guy was damn near famous in our area. We'll come back to him in a minute, but to tell this story, there's another character you need to know about. So there was this girl I went to school with from kindergarten all the way through 7th grade. We went to a small private Christian school. I ended up moving and going to a public school in a different town nearby, starting in 8th grade. And she also started going to public school eventually. She went to the same school as Chad, who I was just telling you about. So there was a lot of similarities between this girl, who I'll call Stacy, and Chad from earlier. But Stacy became a local celebrity at a much younger age. I remember being in the 6th grade, and guys at our school in the 11th and 12th grade would just openly be obsessing over her. They'd be complimenting her, begging her to go on dates with them. It was pretty messed up looking back. I mean, even at the time, I thought it was messed up. But obviously, I also had a crush on her. We were the same age, though. But as I'm sure you can imagine, she was very attractive. I remember one time we went on a field trip to an amusement park like 4 hours away. I think this was in the 6th grade. Had to be either 6th or 7th. But it was just insane seeing how she got treated. Pretty much every single man, including grown men that were there with their wife and children, every single man we walked past would just be staring at her. They had us separated into groups of 5 or 6 with one of the parents as our chaperone, and me and her were in the same group. And so many guys were hitting on this girl that eventually our chaperone, which was another girl in my class's mom, she made us all get in a circle around Stacy so she would be less visible. And that was only after she had tried just walking beside her and aggressively yelling out, "She's 12!" at any man that said anything to her. She did look older than her age, I guess, but still, it was ridiculous. Okay, so fast forward to high school when we're all 16 or 17. Remember, I was no longer in touch with Chad or Stacy by this point in time. They both went to a different school. I hadn't seen either of them in years, but I was still somewhat clued in on their lives because they were both local celebrities, essentially, just because they were attractive. Chad was a prospect in a couple different sports, I think, so he was also known for that, but yeah. There was another girl that was best friends with Stacy. She also went to the same private school with me and Stacy as kids. But then for high school, she actually went to the same school I did. Okay, so just to make sure everything's clear, Stacy and Chad both went to one high school, and me and Stacy's best friend went to a different school in the next town over. Okay, so here's what happened that really opened my eyes to just how different life is for some guys. So apparently there was a party, or maybe just a lot of people hanging out. I don't think it was like a Project X style rager anyways, but Chad and Stacy and Stacy's friend were all there. So the story as I heard it is that there was like maybe 10 to 20 people in a room, and Chad was sitting on a couch with Stacy's best friend sitting on his lap, and she was wearing a skirt, and they were under a blanket together. Now, I'm sure you probably think you see where this is going, but unfortunately, it's actually worse than that. So I'm not going to go into detail. I don't even know all the details, but what I heard is that Chad tried to get it in with Stacy's friend. She said no, and he did it anyways. Right there in the room with all these people around. But it was like they were under a blanket. I think he probably thought he was being stealthy. And this is hearsay, by the way. I can't tell you with 100% certainty that this actually happened the way I heard it. But there was several witnesses to this. And if you're wondering how I know about it, it's because people in my class were talking about it. And I sat there and listened while some guy told his friend the whole story. But everybody was talking about it for a few days after it happened. Like everybody at my school was talking about it. And I guess the story breached containment and made it to the church lady gossip pipeline because after I heard about it at school, my mom told me about it. Keep in mind, my mom used to babysit Chad. She knew his parents, and she knew Stacy's friend and her parents as well, so she took a special interest in the story. And I did also know a few of the supposed witnesses of this event. There was one guy from my school and his girlfriend at the time who also went to my school, and they actually both became vocal opponents of Chad after that because of what happened. And that's why I tend to believe the story is true, because this guy that was friends with Chad stopped being friends with him over it. And also, this guy was evangelizing the tale all over our school. He was telling anybody that would listen, which was everybody, because it was the biggest piece of gossip the school had ever seen, apparently. And Stacy's friend was out of school for an entire week after that, presumably because of what happened and how public it was. She just didn't want to be there knowing everybody would be talking about it, I guess, which is understandable. But here's the crazy part. I heard several girls at my school talking about how they wish it was them. And I heard girls talking trash about Stacy's friend because they were jealous, calling her a liar and all this. There was also a fairly large contingent of vocal supporters of Chad throughout all this, which was primarily made up of girls. And then this is the part that really just, it boggles the mind if you have not already taken the dark-colored capsule. But get this. The next school year after this happened, Chad and Stacy started dating. And Stacy's friend was still best friends with Stacy. They had pictures together with all three of them on Facebook. But before that happened, okay, and I promise I'm not making this up. I already know some of y'all are going to call bullshit. But remember the guy from my school that was friends with Chad, but then after this happened, he became an enemy of Chad? Okay, like I said, that guy and his girlfriend both were there and witnessed the event in person, and they both turned against Chad because of it. Okay, not even just a few months after that, after this whole thing happened, Chad ended up briefly dating that girl. And supposedly, he knocked her up too. But I guess they terminated it. And I can't say for sure that that's even true, but it was a well-known piece of gossip at my school, and it was a fact that they dated. That part definitely did happen. Okay, so this guy apparently did the very, very bad thing to this girl pretty much right in front of about a dozen witnesses. Then after that, he ends up dating the best friend of the girl that he wronged. And the victim herself seemed to be okay with it. And he also boinked another girl that was there that witnessed the event that originally had been telling everyone she knew about how awful it was. There was also a rumor going around that Chad hooked up with a hot teacher at his school. I have no idea if that's true. It probably is. But I just don't know. And after all this, Chad was still a local celebrity. There was like 2 weeks of people talking about this and making a big deal out of it. But then it was just like everybody forgot about it. Because up until the time I graduated, I would still hear people talking about him all the time, usually in a positive way, especially girls. Girls would be talking about him like they're talking about freaking Zac Efron or something. He was just a regular guy, essentially, but he had literal fans all over our local area. These girls were fans of him. But I do remember the one guy from my school that witnessed the event in person. He continued to be anti-Chad, presumably even to this day. I remember one time, probably almost 2 years after the event went down, some girls were talking about Chad in class, and this guy overheard, and he just goes, "Y'all know he blanked Rachel, right?" And instead of, blanked, he said the R word, the word that rhymes with grape. And then the girls, they just shut up after that. But yeah, it's crazy. But that's not even the end of the story. So Chad started dating Stacy, right? Well, at some point, I guess he leaked what was supposed to be private pictures of Stacy. That kind of pictures. I don't know how many people he sent the pictures to, but once they got out, it was like literally every guy in my school was talking about it. I think every single guy in my school saw the pictures, including me. And I didn't even have any friends. And remember, Stacy didn't even go to my school, but she was so hot and so well known in our local area. Her pictures were like the biggest news story of the whole semester when they leaked. And the other thing too, these pictures were like, she didn't send them to Chad. They weren't selfies, okay? They looked like she didn't even know the pictures were being taken. So I'm guessing Chad took these pictures without her knowledge and then probably just sent them to a few friends. I'm sure he didn't mean for everybody to see them. But the pictures got out there and they spread like wildfire. And obviously, as I'm sure you can imagine, she broke up with him. Psych! They kept dating after that for like another year. And I'm pretty sure they only broke up because they went to different colleges. Okay, so let's recap. This guy did the very, very bad thing to Stacy's best friend right in front of several witnesses, including Stacy herself. He also took secret photos of Stacy without her knowing about it, and he shared those photos, which eventually spread so far and wide, even I saw them. And the consequences Chad faced for these actions was literally nothing at all. Stacy stayed with him. He continued to be a local celebrity. There was no consequences whatsoever. So whenever I see people talking about being Chad status or who's a Chad and who's not, I always think back to this guy from my hometown. That will always be my mental model for what Chad means. And it's crazy because even though all this shit that happened with this guy was very well known, it was all very gossiped about when it happened, I guarantee virtually everybody that knows about all this still remains blue-pilled. They still deny reality even after seeing Chad act like a demon on earth, just doing whatever he wants with no consequences, and seeing all the females he victimized still continue to chase after him. These people still deny reality. Basically, the way I see it, there are 4 categories of men. There's Chads at the top of the hierarchy. These are the guys, like the guy I've been talking about, that get treated like gods by women. They don't have to put in any effort. They just go out in public and women approach them all the time. And they make it obvious that they are willing to jump when Chad says jump. The label gets thrown around a lot in these spaces, but most of you are using the Chad label incorrectly a lot of the time to refer to guys that don't really fit the description. A true Chad is maybe 0.01% of the male population. At best, that is 1 in 10,000 men. They might actually be more rare than that, even. Then there's one step below Chad. You could call this Chad Light, I guess, just to use an existing terminology. But this is what most people are actually talking about when they refer to someone as a Chad. This is the guys that do pretty well with women. They hook up with a good number of women. They can usually settle down and get married with a decent chick if they decide to do so. But the difference between Chad Light and Chad is that Chad doesn't even have to try. Chad Light does have to put in effort. Remember at the beginning of this video when I said there's one little thing that makes all the difference between Chad and a guy that just has some success with women? Well, that one little thing is genetics. It all boils down to a man's genetic looks potential. The quality of life that a man experiences on this planet is dependent upon the genetic looks potential he was born with. Now, there are some non-Chads out there that could have been Chad status if they didn't get obese, but there's no such thing as a man living the Chad lifestyle that wasn't born with top-tier genetic looks potential. And no, I don't believe any amount of cosmetic surgery can elevate a man to that level. Most men living life at the Chad level were just born into it, and nothing they do really affects it other than maybe a bad diet. Getting fat is the only thing that can knock Chad off his throne. He doesn't have to lift. He doesn't have to watch his diet as long as he's not a sugar addict. He doesn't have to have good game. He doesn't have to have any personality at all, actually. He could even be evil incarnate. It doesn't matter. He's born like that. That is the truth about what it takes to be the tippy-toppiest upper echelon of highly desirable man. Genetics. That's what it takes. So after Chad Light, there's average men. Some average men will have some success with women, but it's not even really success. Some average men will be able to get with women infrequently, but they won't be high-quality women. And the average man will never experience true love from a woman. Only Chad experiences true love. But some average men will get to pass on their genes, and they might even be able to land a woman for a long-term relationship that's actually attractive if he squints his eyes the right way with the lights off, which honestly, that's not that bad a deal compared to the last category of men. At the bottom of the hierarchy are the untouchables, the men that are destined to be forever alone. No woman could possibly ever love a man in this category. And similar to Chad, it all boils down to a man's genetic looks potential. Generally, a man this low on the totem pole isn't even going to be able to climb out of it with cosmetic surgery. Now, even though the vast majority of men are in the average category, there's a lot more untouchable men than you might think. It's a lot more common than Chad, and it's probably even more common than Chad Light. You don't have to be facially deformed to be an untouchable. You just have to be unattractive enough to be repulsive to the majority of women. And that's not really a very low bar these days. Unfortunately, There's a lot of guys in this category that probably would have lived completely normal lives if they had only been born a few decades earlier. That's how screwed up modern society is. As a man on the lower end of the average category, if I'm assessing myself correctly, it's really depressing to know how some men get to live life on easy mode, living like gods on earth, just being worshipped by every woman they come across. It's just, what can you say? It's not fair. But that is our reality. That is the truth about humanity and society and the sexual preferences that women have. I do think there's still some beauty to be found in this world, even for average men. But the fact of the matter is that your dealings with women are never going to be overall pleasant. It's not going to be in your favor. You're always going to be having an uphill battle, and truly, you're always going to lose in the end. Yes, there are outliers, but that's not most of us. Now, for men in the untouchables category, really, what can you say? At that point, it's all about finding value internally within yourself. You got to be able to cope with the fact that most people probably don't even see you as human. I would never tell somebody to give up on this existence. I do think, you got to make the best of it. Even if you were only dealt a single two of hearts in a poker game where everyone else got a full hand and the rest of the deck was all face cards. Let me know in the comments if that metaphor made any sense. I don't play poker, but I think I understand the rules. But yeah, look, the current dating market is fucked up. A select, very few men have virtually every woman they ever come across just serving themselves up on a silver platter, while most of us can only hope to pick up the scraps. And some of us, unfortunately, don't even get any scraps. We just get slaps, if anything, for even daring to smile at a woman. So it's not fair. It's brutal. It frickin' sucks. But fellas, there is beauty in this world. I know I don't usually do this. Honestly, I don't usually feel this way. But really, there is beauty in the world. If not within humanity, then at least within nature. Have you ever just looked at a bird? Like just watched a robin sitting on a fence, just singing a little tune? I know I'm coping. I know that. But try going for a walk and just pay attention to the birds. They're actually really interesting. And I think it's worth it to just live life and enjoy the birds. Or listen to running water, like a babbling creek with birds and crickets and whatever else. Like flowers. I'm being serious, by the way. Flowers, trees, birds, mountains, rock formations, if you live in that sort of biome. I know there are men out there that are literally deformed, that get treated so poorly, even I can't understand it. So I know even me being the loser I am, even I am speaking from a perspective that seems unattainable to some. But I implore you to try to watch birds. And listen too, because they sing, okay? Birds sing, literally, and it's pretty cool to hear. Or watch some of Akira Kurosawa's films. That's a good way to cope. But let me know in the comments if any of you know about a good, affordable pair of binoculars so I can see birds better. Please consider watching some of my other videos if you enjoyed this one. There's some secret videos you can watch for free on my Patreon, so check that out. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.